मुखर होने के लिए जानी जाती हैं। हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स जैसे दैनिक समाचार पत्रों और द टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया के वरिष्ठ सहायक संपादक के रूप में काम करने के बाद आपने इंडो एशियन न्यूज सर्विस IANS एजेंसी में एक विदेशी और सुरक्षा मामलों के संपादक के रूप में ख्याति अर्जित की है। मंच पर अतिथि को और समापन सत्र का संचालन कर रहे हैं यूसुफ टी ऊंझावाला। आप भारत के सबसे बड़े ऑनलाइन रक्षा मंच डिफेंस फोरम इंडिया के संपादक हैं और रक्षा और रणनीतिक मामलों के कमेंटेटर हैं। इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स, मिंट, द प्रिंट, लाइफ इज, द प्रगति, डेक्कन हेराल्ड, द पायनियर ऑब्जर्वर रिसर्च फाउंडेशन पर रक्षा और रणनीतिक मामलों में आपका विशेष योगदान रहा है। एक बार फिर से आपको बताना चाहेंगे 5वां सत्र है जिसका
क्योंकि यूसुफ जी बहुत कोमल हैं, उनको चाबुक नहीं चलाना आता है, तो मैंने निर्णय कर लिया कि मैं चाबुक चलाऊंगा इस सेशन में। तो इसको कहते हैं टू फ्रंट वॉर। क्या है, देखिए, जब टू फ्रंट वॉर लड़ते हैं उसमें कई सारे कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं। पहले खुद को जानना चाहिए और फिर दुश्मन को जानना चाहिए, पर दुश्मन से ज्यादा तो पहले खुद को जानना चाहिए। तो मैं इसको थोड़ा इंट्रोस्पेक्टिव रखूंगा। मैं सुशांत सरीन से शुरू करूंगा। मेरा निवेदन है कि सब अपना ओपनिंग कमेंट्स बस 2 मिनट तक रखें, मैं टाइम करने वाला हूं। सुशांत जी।
Should I start? My time starts now.
Your time starts now.
30 seconds.
अच्छा, देखिए, I think the worst situation any general wants is a two-front war. And the way we talk about a two-front war is as if we are playing some kind of a Xbox 360 kind of a game. And it's a war in itself is a very serious business, but a two-front war is something which every country, regardless of whether it is a superpower, middling power like India, or even a small state wants to avoid. It's a disaster if you have to fight on two fronts. Does that mean that you should not be prepared for a situation, given the condition on India's borders, where you could, and it's very imminent, you could face a situation when both the fronts are very hostile. हमारी जितनी भी जंगें हुई हैं उसमें हर बार हमने ये देखा है, दो फ्रंट तो नहीं खोले थे, but every time what we have noticed is that when we were fighting against the Pakistanis, the Chinese did mount pressure on our eastern borders. So we had to keep a part of our army engaged out there. And that's, अगर वो hostile हो जाती situation वहाँ पर, तो आपके लिए बहुत ज़्यादा problems हो जाती। हमारी ना तो जो कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव नेशनल पावर है वो टू फ्रंट वॉर को अलाउ करती है, और ना ही हमको टू फ्रंट वॉर की तरफ जाना चाहिए। एंड दैट इज व्हाई टू अवॉइड अ टू फ्रंट वॉर व्हाट यू नीड इज diplomacy to make sure that you don't have to fight on two fronts simultaneously. There could be a situation where you might face a two front war. And if you do face that, then you have to use all elements of power to combat. But that will be a defensive war. To initiate a war and to initiate a war on two fronts, like many people very often in a very cavalier manner advocate, कि जी हमको अब POK में हमको अपनी फौजें घुसा देनी चाहिए। रूस ने यूक्रेन में अपनी फौजें घुसा करके देख लिया कि क्या होता है। And one of the things every general will tell you, every general worth his salt will tell you, वो नहीं कि टाइम स्केल जनरल बन गए हैं, लेकिन capability से जो generals बनते हैं, and thinking generals will tell you that wars have a very bad habit of going wrong. I'll just finish in 30 seconds. Wars have a very bad habit of going wrong. So yes, you need to be prepared to fight a defensive war on two fronts, but hope that you'll be able to avoid fighting on two fronts, because that will be an unmitigated disaster.
Remember, it was Hitler pretty much lost the war because he opened the second front without finishing the first front. And there's a lot to be said about Germany having better officers and better equipment and still losing a two-front war. Shivji, your opening comments, please. You can use that mic. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to thank Jaipur Dialogues and Sanjay Dikshit ji for this wonderful opportunity. And I also just want to point out something that Swami Vijnananand said yesterday. We shouldn't be sitting showing our shoes at the audience. So I took off my shoes. Thank you, sir. Now I have only 2 minutes. I'll make 2 points. Put on my glasses first. First of all, I don't think there's going to be a two-front war at all at the borders unless we initiate it. There are very many reasons. I can't go into those reasons, but the coordination that China and Pakistan would require is very high. And there are a lot of other, supposing Pakistan starts losing or China starts losing, are they going to pull out the troops from here? So these are all problems. We will have to start the two-front war, which I doubt if we are going to do. The thing which I really came prepared to talk about, and I'm willing to say, is this fear that all Indians have. And I'll just list those fears. I won't go into the details. The truths that have been banged into our heads. Oh, China has an economy that's 5 times bigger than us. They're not going to throw the economy at us in the war. China has armed forces that are 3 times larger than us. This is another deadly fear. We are shivering, this is what we are doing. And that they have thousands of missiles aimed at us, and they have 5-tier air defenses, and they are expanding their border infrastructure. And of course, the IAF is small and becoming smaller. I have points to refute and reassure people about all these things, but I need time for that. It won't be done in 2 minutes.
We'll do that during the conversation. Aarti?
Okay. Thank you, Jaipur Dialogues, Sanjay ji, for inviting me here. This is my first time at Jaipur Dialogues. Well, I want to begin by saying that the title, 2.5 Front War, Are We Ready?, is actually a very misleading title. Because I do not believe that this is just a 2.5 front war. It is a multiple front war. And I'm going to give you in very brief the evidence to the fact that it's a multiple front 360-degree war. One, although my friend Sushant and the preceding speaker, Shivji, said that China-Pakistan axis is a huge threat, and they are in an alliance, which all of us know. But we must remember from history that, one, Pakistan became a nuclear state not only because of China, but also because of the United States of America. तो ये भ्रम में रहना कि सिर्फ चाइना और पाकिस्तान का एक्सीज है, ये गलत होगा. हमें याद रखना चाहिए कि 1971 में यूएसएस एंटरप्राइज बे ऑफ बंगाल एंटर करने वाला था, और उस वक्त अमेरिका और ब्रिटेन, दोनों कंट्रीज जिसको हम आज अपना स्ट्रेटेजिक अलाइज मानते हैं, वो उस वक्त पाकिस्तान के साथ खड़े थे. तीसरी बात, ये कहना कि सिर्फ चाइना और पाकिस्तान हमारे दुश्मन हैं और उन लोगों के साथ हम लोगों के फ्रंट्स जो है, नॉर्दर्न फ्रंट, ईस्टर्न फ्रंट, वेस्टर्न फ्रंट, वहां से लड़ाई होगी, ये बिल्कुल गलत है. क्योंकि पिछले 40 साल का रिकॉर्ड जो है पाकिस्तान का और चाइना का, उसमें यूएस उतना ही कंप्लिसिट है जितना चाइना है. तो ये इस गलतफहमी में नहीं रहना चाहिए. अमेरिका का रोल क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म में, जो कश्मीर में पिछले 40 साल से पंजाब में खालिस्तान मूवमेंट में रहा, वो हमें नहीं भूलना चाहिए. और आखिर में मैं ये कहूंगी कि इंटरनल जो एक वॉर चल रहा है, जो सिविलाइजेशनल वॉर की बात हम कल से कर रहे हैं, उसमें भी पाकिस्तान के अलावा अमेरिका, चाइना, यूनाइटेड किंगडम, वो सभी मिले हुए हैं. उन सबका एक रोल है, उसको नजरअंदाज नहीं करना चाहिए.
Thank you. Yusuf?
Thank you, Jaipur Dialogues, and thank you for the audience, the presence over here. I'll pick up from where Sushantji and Shivji left off. One, we don't want to fight a two-front war. Secondly, overestimating the threat of a two-front war and even the overestimating the capabilities of our enemies and then preparing based on that will lead to a wasteful expense of a lot of our money and our resources. But then what do we do if there is a real credible threat of a two-front war? And as Sushantji said, we'll have to use all our might to prevent a war from happening. And there are four ways in that. The first one is to dissuade the enemy. What do you mean by that? Is persuade the enemy in many non-military forms that waging a war against us is going to be very costly. And how do you do that? We do that with our economic strength, our diplomacy, our partners, our multilateral partnerships that we have, multilateral groupings that we have, waging psychological warfare on the enemy, policy measures, just to make sure that the enemy knows that it's going to cost it a lot. This is something that we're doing right now as we speak on the China front. Since 2020, we're trying to dissuade the Chinese from going more than what they have already done by banning apps, getting them out of certain areas of our sectors where the investment is banned. They are not allowed in the 5G. We are taking action against some of the companies.
Sir, please no interruption. Please, no. Please no interruption. Could you please finish? No, please, sir. No interruption. Please, not now. Yusuf, please finish. Please finish. You can come in later, please.
Yeah, so what we are doing is telling China that you will be out of the 1.4 billion people market if you are going to pursue your hostile acts against us. So this is part of this dissuasion thing. Second one is deterrence. Our military readiness to convince both Pakistan and China that any acts against us is going to be costly for them, because we will be able to hurt them in certain manners that will hurt their ability to wage war against us. So deterrence is a key part. The third one is nuclear weapons. Can we imagine 3 nuclear-powered countries going to war with each other? I don't think so. The other one is we have a nuclear no first use policy. I think this was drafted back in 2003, and it's long overdue for a revision, considering the current security and geopolitical situation. Now, in the two-front situation, if Pakistan attacks us from one front, they have a very low threshold of nuclear weapons. I'll just complete in 30 seconds.
This Anand is going to ruin my session. He doesn't have to be present at a session to destroy a session.
So but I will actually complete in 30 seconds. So
Anand
they have a low
Ranganathan
threshold.
Murdabad.
They do have a low threshold of nuclear weapons, and we'll cross that threshold. And that would open up India actually using nuclear weapons, or at least threatening to use nuclear weapons against China. And then China is not going to allow that to happen. So Pakistan is actually going to be worse off if it tries to attack India in a two-front situation. And finally, the war strategy if the deterrence fails. And this part is, again, if we are able to open fronts against Pakistan, deep ingress, cross that threshold, are they going to be better off than they were before the war? Will they be able to meet any objective? Will China be able to meet any of its objectives? And that is where showing the intent to fight will form part of deterrence.
Okay. Now, remember, the 2.5 front war was what was said. And I think the 0.5 was the information sphere and terrorism and, the internal disturbances and things like that. But Sushant, coming back to you, you made a very interesting point that, it was Chinese pressure. The Chinese have always pressurized us on the second front. But as far as I see on that 0.5 front, the Chinese are on the back foot. They don't really have an information game per se. And at what point do you think that Chinese pressure will actually cross a tripwire and go into actual hostile actions?
Now that depends whether the wars are initiated on one front by the Pakistanis or by the Chinese. If it's run by the Chinese, then I think the Chinese are going to pull out all the stops when they are coming after us. I agree with what Shiv was saying, that it's not that we are defenseless. But when we talk about, and I'm just digressing just a little bit, when we talk about a two-front situation, and we talk very loosely about it. It's part of our bravado when we talk about sawa lakh se ek lada. Now it's very good to rouse people to action, but if you're a military strategist, that's the worst thing you can do, right? Uh, I would rather win a war through sneakiness than through the typical Rajput chivalry, right? It's the most stupid thing to do to be chivalrous in war. Wars, you fight wars to win wars, not to demonstrate your chivalry. So I think we need to get out of that kind of rut. And I don't want to insult any historical figures, but frankly, I think purely in terms of military strategy, what historical figures who were supposed to be heroes in India did was a strategic mistake.
Right.
But on the Chinese front, I think the threshold will be crossed when, in the event of Pakistan, I think the point 0.5, purely in terms of the cyber capabilities and the other communication facility capabilities, will probably come into being much earlier than the second front or the rest of the stuff will happen. Because I don't see Pakistan initiate any kind of an adventurism now against India without first bringing the Chinese on board. So my own assessment is that the moment that starts, you will see a lot of activity, at least in the cyberspace, where the Chinese have a significant presence and advantage, and they've been working on it. They have actually got much more robust systems than we have. Some of our systems are robust, but a bulk of our systems are quite open. And this, I'm not an expert in this, but people who are professionals in that particular field are very clear about the fact that we are extremely vulnerable on the cyber domain. And I think that is something that will be brought to bear. How well we can resist that is another matter. And just one more point I'll say. When we talk about two fronts, we must remember when the front with the Chinese side started heating up, we had to pull out troops from our western front to beef up our eastern front, simply to make a demonstration of force against the Chinese. So when we talk about a two-front situation, you can't say I'm going to be pulling out troops from the Pakistani front and taking them to the Chinese front, and then I'm going to fight on two fronts. If you had the capabilities, you would not have had to pull out from your Pakistan front and take troops to the Chinese front to beef up your capabilities. And I think that is why we need to be mindful of our limitations when we
Right.
talk about
But
that.
coming to Chinese strategy in the 0.5 sphere, you know, the Chinese infiltrated a Indian nuclear reactor. They didn't get into the operational system, but they got into the payrolls, possibly for honey traps or money traps or whatever. They also apparently managed to take down Bombay's electricity grid or something, or enter Bombay's electricity grid or something like that. Why do you think that they demonstrate these capabilities and kind of warn us to that, when, you know, it's much more useful during a war for us to not know that they have these capabilities and be caught unaware?
My own suspicion is that it's a demonstration of force. It's a demonstration of intent of what they can do. And if they have just demonstrated this much, that means that the capabilities which they have are probably much more than what they have demonstrated so far. But it is a way of, signaling to your enemy of how vulnerable they are, how open they are, and how they scared they should be. So it's like what you very often see in movies, a guy making a big song and dance about something, and the other guy just getting browbeaten simply by that demonstration effect. I think it was more of that than anything else. But I suspect that their capabilities to harm us in this domain are quite fearsome.
आपका ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एक कॉन्फ्रेंस चलाता है साइफाई, जो साइबर सिक्योरिटी पे फोकस करता है, और आपकी क्या राय है इस पे? हमारे यहाँ कोई क्षमता है उनको रोकने
I
के
want to
लिए?
keep my job, so I'll just keep quiet about it.
अच्छा, तो शिव जी हिंदी में बात करूँ ना?
हिंदी में बात कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन जो टेक्निकल बातें हैं वो
अच्छा,
देर
नहीं,
लगेगा, where I
हाँ,
will be struggling. So
ठीक
let
है,
me speak in English and
हाँ,
let's get information through
ठीक है,
rather than trying to waste time
बिल्कुल.
my finding words in Hindi.
Okay, fine. So, Sushant said, how the Chinese sometimes use capabilities to sort of project a bigger image than they actually are. And, Sun Tzu says this, when you're weak, pretend to be strong, and when you're strong, pretend to be weak, kind of thing. First, where do you assess the Chinese capability? Second, actually, why don't you answer that, then I'll ask you the second.
Yeah, see, it's very simple. The Chinese have scared the Indians. Indians are scared. They've browned their pants. Their capabilities are not, for various reasons. I can expand on those reasons. But for a minute, let me just point out that I've been discussing these things on social media and outside for the last 20 years. And the word 2.5 front war has come up only in the last few years. And even on Jaipur dialogues, the 0.5 front is internal, our internal enemies. And we have spent the last 2 days discussing what to do about our internal enemies. So if we're going to discuss anything now, not going to do a repeat of the internal enemies, which includes Bollywood. Let us talk about the two war fronts. And I'll be as brief as I can. I forgot your question. What was your question?
So the question was, what do you think the Chinese are doing? Because
Yeah.
you say, is it weakness? How do you assess
No,
China's
see,
capabilities?
Yeah, see, this is the problem.
I'll come to the other questions
Yeah.
later. If you
No,
could just,
this is part of the same thing.
Okay.
I'm not going to address all that.
Okay.
There are two things, in terms of Chinese capability. If you talk about, they say they have thousands of missiles. The internet is there. We are looking at the internet. We look at porn and things like that. Look at Chinese capability. The Americans have, Indians are not doing much. Americans have done a lot of work. Chinese have about 1,700, 1,800 missiles. Okay. How many are they going to put against India? Okay, put it as half because they're going to keep some against Taiwan. Say even 900 against India. What is a missile? Missile has a warhead. It has a bomb in it. How big is the bomb? 300 kg, 500 kg. A Jaguar aircraft which we laugh at and say, oh, Jaguar, useless. We must have F-35. Jaguar carries 500 kg bombs. We just don't know this. We are saying they're going to put. Do you know the Americans put 75 missiles on a Syrian airbase and next day planes were taking off? There has been an assessment by Lieutenant General Palapur Ravishankar that they will need 200 missiles to take out one airbase. What are we scared of Chinese missiles? One. The other thing is, this room has maybe 200, 300 seats, okay, maybe even 400. Supposing 10,000 people want to come in, can we accommodate? No. You need to understand that Tibet is 4,500 meters up in the air. I would say that 90% of you, if you were taken to Tibet today, some of you would die, other people would not be able to breathe. They cannot bring in so many people. They've only got 5 or 6 air bases. If you knock them out early in the war, they will have no planes. You can have 25,000 planes. If you have no air bases, they are not going to come. Thank you. I'll finish with that.
Just some follow-up. This thing about missiles, I started hearing that, Russian missiles will run out. They've run out of missiles in March. And as far as I can tell over Ukraine, the Ukrainians don't seem to have gotten the message and the Russians don't seem to have gotten the message that Russia's missiles have run out and we're in November. And those missiles keep falling left, right, and center, taking out critical infrastructure. What if we've got our assessments of just 1,800 missiles wrong?
Yeah, make it 5,000. What number do you want to put?
Okay.
Yeah, make it 5,000.
Which then brings me to the second counter question. How many missiles do we need to budget for to knock out their bases?
This is the whole problem. You don't fight a sword with a sword. You oppose a sword with a shield. So just because they have missiles doesn't mean we must have missiles.
So how do you propose knocking out their airfields?
The thing is, this country is fed on social media. When drones came in, they say, we need drones, we need drones. Now, missiles, we need missiles. Everybody thinks, ये हवाई जहाज जो है, वायुसेना जाते हैं, बम डालते हैं, they will be shot down. People don't understand how the Air Force works and how air tactics will work. If I may just spend a minute to say that. What does the Air Force do in a war? One, okay, within 40 kilometers of the border, close airstrike to support the army. Say 40 to 200 kilometers is called interdiction, where they knock out the trains and the tanks coming. And then beyond 200 kilometers, you knock out the command and control centers, the radars and things like that. in our situation, we've got a small air force. The close air support part is not going to take place. It has never taken place. Probably Army will do it with our new helicopters. They have to somehow manage. Jasjeet Singh ji has written that the Army is going to be disappointed with the air support that they get. But we'll get too many planes knocked down. What we have to do is to hit them in a war, in any war. The Air Force has to start within first 2 days. Do you people remember that the after the Parliament attack, the air chief who retired said that we had 2,000 targets in Pakistan ready. How do you attack 2,000 targets? We didn't even have so many missiles then. That is the number of planes that will go low level, avoiding radar, and hit 2,000 targets. In the first 3 days of war, knock out Ngari, knock out Ningchi airfield, Ngari airfield, and all the other 2 to 3 airfield, knock out Lhasa airfield, knock out their radars. And please don't think that there is a wall at the LAC. ऐसा दीवार है जो प्लेन जाती है और दीवार को मार के गिर जाती है. No, you cannot have air defenses like that. Air defenses are in little circles around Lhasa, Ningchi, and all that.
And just a question, when those planes go to attack, how many of them do you think will come back?
Yeah, if you take
Because a lot of them are Russian, and we see what happens to Russian planes in
it's
Ukraine.
not about Russian. It's about the tactics. See, Russians don't know anything. The Russians don't know how to fly. I'm sorry. You have to go in. You know our aircraft practice flying at 50 feet. 50 feet. You look at, just read all the accounts of old wars. You go in at 50 feet. You're not going to get defeated. One difference between aircraft and missiles is that once the aircraft know that 4 aircraft are attacking, one gets hit or one, there is going to be attrition. They're going to get shot. We have this feeling, I have got this new car, and hurry, it must not get scratched. We must keep it. No, we have to send everything in. And what will happen is, once you realize, for instance, I will take Kargil as an example. They sent helicopters in first without any defenses. Bang, bang, bang. We had a helicopter going, we had a MiG-27 going. After that, nothing. They changed the tactics. So same thing, when you get into a war, you start attacking, you have all your targets ready, you lose something, then there are a lot of air defenses there. Let's change our tactics.
Fair point.
Let's send.
Let me take this to Aarti. Aarti, you talked about America's role in, how that 0.5, you actually classify it as America's sort of behind the scenes influence karke. What if I told you that Russia had pretty much the same attitude? The first person to give Shehla Rashid the international platform was actually Russia Today. I know both Sushant and I have refused to give Russia Today interviews because there's very little difference between Russia Today and PTV, Pakistan Television, when it comes to India coverage. Russia also supplies China with the S-400 systems. They supply them with Sukhois. Russia supplies, and America does not supply China with weapons. Russia also supplies the JF-17 engines to Pakistan. So why is it not, 3-front war? Because 0.5 America and 0.5 Russia.
I'm glad you asked me this question, and that is why at the very beginning I said it's a 360-degree war. It's not just 2.5 front. That's why I'm not excluding any player on the global scene from attacks against India. Also, I want to remind you that America's role in cross-border terrorism in the last 40 years, Khalistan front, Kashmir front, that aside, if you look how the US withdrew from Afghanistan, leaving $7 billion worth arms and equipment, who is it for? Afghan Taliban today are actually looking, if you look at the Sirajuddin faction with Al-Qaeda backing them, ISIS backing them, they are looking at carving out a state which includes Indian Kashmir, Balochistan, and some parts of Pakistan. That is one. The other part, the same Taliban today is also allies with China, right? The same Afghan, if you look at Ahmad Shah Massoud Jr., who is the only one who's been fighting Taliban, the Northern Alliance, which we used to back once upon a time. Ahmad Shah Massoud Sr. was killed by the CIA, as we all know. Now, my point is simply this: do not exclude American role in Asia, in Indian subcontinent. the kind of devastation, the kind of havoc that they have created on multiple fronts. Do not exclude that. Factor that in as well. Russia, you have a beef.
Give me a
You have a beef
solution.
with Russia. I grant you that. Russia has also been an empire. It was a bigger empire at one point of
Sure.
time.
Give me a solution, because access to Russian markets is not going to make or break India. It's a small market. Access to the EU and US markets will make or break India. And it is the US and EU organizations that are most active within India in sort of, creating all these human rights narratives and this and that narratives, trying to sort of bring us down. So give me a solution. How do you engage? How do you play a China, which was going to be a peer competitor to America, but still it was America that made China rich through access to markets?
अभिजीत ने बहुत अच्छा सवाल पूछा. ये वही सवाल है जो जब ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी आई भारत में तो यही आर्गुमेंटेशन था. मार्केट, ट्रेड, यूरोप के साथ इंडिया का ट्रेड, और अब हम अमेरिका की बात करते हैं तो ट्रेड उनके टर्म्स पे, बट उसका जो प्राइस हम पे करते हैं, जो कॉस्ट पे कर रहा है इंडिया 200 साल से, अमेरिकन, ब्रिटिश, ये सारे एक ही एम्पायर में कंसिडर करती हूँ, वेस्टर्न एम्पायर. तो ये आर्गुमेंट तब भी था जब ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी आई, ये आर्गुमेंट अभी भी है. लेकिन टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड जो है वो किन की शर्तों पे होना चाहिए? वो उनकी शर्तों पे होना चाहिए कि भारत की शर्तों पे होना चाहिए? ये जब तक हम लोगों को नहीं समझ आएगा तब तक हम लगातार हम गलतियां करेंगे और उनके गुलाम बन के रहेंगे.
Yusuf, you made this very important point about, how ultimately, I mean, carrying on from Aarti's point, that you can't really depend on external powers, which kind of brings us to indigenization. And we've had this conversation very often. I mean, why are we still not able to get it right? I mean, why do Indian companies getting into defense have such a hard time, and the government tries to screw them over and set criterias and categories and performance results on them that they completely exclude Western companies from?
So that's been happening. I think partly it's the import lobby. The first thing is the quality of weapons which the armed forces seem to feel that are superior. That is one. Secondly, our industrial capability to produce top-class weapons. We can't produce everything. I'll come back to RT's.
But Yusuf, I agree we can't produce everything. But I know for a fact we have very good capacity to produce small guns, relatively pistols, rifles, right up to what Kalyani and people produced in terms of, howitzers. Still, the contract goes to a Korean company.
Not only
And you
that,
want to get American cannons.
Yeah, not only that, the rifles, we're coming up with AK-203 rifle factory.
Why?
That
From
is
the Russians?
Russian.
Why? You have Indian small arms, you have Indian rifles. Why?
Well, we have to ask the government for that. I mean,
मैं तुमसे पूछ रहा हूँ, tell us.
It's I think one of the reasons that we do is kind of buying influence. We throw good money at Russia. We have been doing it for a long time so that we can buy their support. And this is at the UN. This has not been happening. It's not materializing. If you see Russian support or lack of it in the UN, when Article 370 was withdrawn and the Chinese took the case to the UNSC, the Russian ambassador is on record saying that the resolution of 1948 is also part of it, along with Shimla and Lahore. And this was a huge thing. When did Russia start to believe in the UN Security Council resolution of 1948? Apart from that,
yeah.
Since you mentioned that started when the Russians got into the Chinese lab, because that is precisely what the Chinese position is. And that position hasn't changed for the last, I don't know how many decades. The Chinese say that the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, along with all the other bilateral arrangements, which is what effectively the Russians said, albeit in different words. So that should answer your question.
and
Right.
it was vetoed by the US and France. And that's the reason why it failed in the
only
UNSC.
people, at least for the last 25 years, who have been resolutely standing with India in the UNSC has been France.
France.
Every time, even the Americans have shafted us, the Brits have always shafted us. The Brits always play a very cunning and slimy game. They've always done it, they will continue to do it, regardless of people being very enthused about Rishi Sunak becoming the Prime Minister. And I don't know why we are so happy about it.
Please don't be anti-Hindu. He's a Hindu man. You're being very anti-Hindu.
Yeah, so on certain, I can be anti-Hindu, but at least I'm pro-India. So I don't think we should be under any illusions on that count. But I think it's very important to understand the Russians shafted us. The Chinese have always been hostile to us. The Americans have been, playing games, what suits them. It's the French who have stuck by us. So if the French and the Americans vetoed it, that's understandable.
Thank you. So that was the geopolitical answer. Shiv,
No,
I'm going to badger you
Abhi,
for a technical.
Not
Sorry,
only that,
one second.
the Russians have committed, and this is Putin's word, committed to enable China with advanced ballistic missile defense system, which
Yusuf,
blunts
I'm talking about
our deterrent. No, it is
indigenization.
it
Let's
is
focus
important
on
for the two-front
indigenization.
threat. So our entire nuclear deterrent is based on missiles when it comes to China, and Russia committed to providing it with advanced technology for ballistic missile defense. It blunts our deterrent.
Right. But that still doesn't answer the question on the lack of indigenization. So Shiv, I'm going to come to you. But before that, quickly an audience question to Panditji. Panditji, did Rishi Sunak ever open his mouth on the Leicester riots? I think his laugh, if the cameras can focus on his laugh, I think the laugh should give you... He's going to plead the Fifth Amendment, the American Fifth Amendment, the right to silence, which should tell you exactly how pro-Hindu that Rishi Sunak is. But Shiv, coming to you, we have seen time and again, we've seen the exact same indigenization efforts by the government. Almost word to word, what the NDA does is the same as what the UPA did and failed, and then UPA 1 did and failed, and then God knows what was before that did and failed, and what was before that did and failed. We keep coming back. I have arms manufacturer after arms manufacturer after arms manufacturer who's domestic, who are fantastic, by the way, not focusing on big systems, focusing on small systems like guns or, surveillance turrets and things like that, who keep coming and telling me our product is better. When I actually go inspect it, their product is better. They do not get any contracts from the government. They all go to foreign companies. Without getting into geopolitics, what is wrong with the government?
I'm glad you said without getting into geopolitics. The only thing is, it's not what's wrong with the government, it's what's wrong with us as Indians. So I always like to start with World War I. When World War I started and the Germans were in the war, they were making their own weapons. Britain had about 400 aircraft. And by the end of the war in 1918, Britain, I think, had something like 13,000 aircraft. Now, where was Britain importing from? Which country was exporting? Was it France or was it America or was it Germany? They were not importing. They were making planes. Those planes were crashing. Those tanks were not working. People were dying, but there was nobody to help them. They just had to depend on their own. This is true across the board for Europe. And they started at the beginning of the 20th century. For us, right from the beginning, there have always been people, yellow, take this. We want vampire, we get vampire. We want Oregon, we get Oregon. We get Mr. So we've got a company, see, I don't want Maruti, I don't want Tata, I want Audi, I want BMW, because these are good cars.
They're not. They're actually the lousiest cars. They are thoroughly unreliable. Just 1 second, an interruption out here. Whatever you do not buy German cars.
So,
as the former owner of several German cars, I can tell you, एक बूंद पानी पड़ती है, एक ब्रिज के नीचे पानी आ जाता है, 1 इंच उसमें अगर पानी आ जाता है, it stops. If you see a BMW owner, an Audi owner or Mercedes owner, उसके सर पे tattoo लगा लो उल्लू का पट्टा. Okay, it is not worth the money. And you know what is particularly surprising is the Germans lost twice the number of tanks against the Soviets to equipment malfunction than they did to Soviet tanks and Soviet gunners. I kid you not. Go check it out. Twice. So,
if I just interject, this is a very good point in one way. It's a mindset. The Germans like their equipment. We hate ourselves. You know, when I am in India, when I'm studying in India, I'm equal with my classmates. The minute I go to America, you know, I am better than you. You idiots in India, you can't do anything. So the guy, you know, if I may just digress for a minute, I once had a patient, I've told this story, my wife, you know, many times. I once had a patient who came with abdominal symptoms, and I once had a patient who came with stomach symptoms. I knew that this was not stomach, this could be psychological. So I asked him, about his family. I asked him about his sons. And this is many years ago. And I said, well, I have two sons. What are they doing? My younger son is in America, he said. Then I asked him, what about the elder son? He's in Bangalore. You know, so this feeling that we are useless, it goes to the extent that no matter how hard anyone works in India, it's not good. It's not good enough. It's got to come from abroad. And we have Aditya sitting right over there, making good weapons. We are not going to take it because we have such a low opinion. You're all useless people. I've been abroad. I'm better than you. Okay, have you been abroad? No. So I'm better than you. This is Indian gulami. This is a mindset. We hate ourselves. We hate anyone who, you know, we only admire something with white skin. Okay, and when it comes from abroad, this is a problem. This is a very definite, deep problem extending right up to the air marshals, the generals, the government, the bureaucrats. And this is
But
not
we elected a nationalist government precisely to overcome that.
Bengan.
What?
Bengan.
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 Black on the
Yeah,
outside, white
it is
on the
Bengan.
inside.
Nationalist is Bengan. Yeah.
Okay. And that comes to you, Aarti. Now, you tell me, when every time, and I'm putting this purely as a provocative counterpoint to you, Shivji. जब भी मैं मतलब कि ये बोलता हूं हिंदुस्तानियों से कि भाई तुमको अपना ओवर एस्टिमेशन है, तुम अब तक कुछ प्रोड्यूस नहीं कर पाए हो जैसे गोरे लोग प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, तो वो साक्षात सुपीरियर होंगे। आप इसके बारे में ए क्या कहती हैं कि क्या वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन हमारे एजुकेशन से बेहतर है, या बी वेस्ट में लोगों पे इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, हिंदुस्तान में इक्विपमेंट पे इन्वेस्ट करते हैं? इधर का समझ है कि अगर आप एक भिखारी को फेरारी देंगे वो मुकेश अंबानी बन जाएगा, वेरस वेस्ट में मानते हैं कि भाई अगर आप मुकेश अंबानी का एजुकेशन उस भिखारी को दोगे तब वो खुद फेरारी खरीद लेगा।
अभिजीत, ये एक्चुअली इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है। ये कनेक्टेड है हाफ फ्रंट की। जब हम बात करते हैं, जो बैटल, सिविलाइजेशनल बैटल है, वो हाफ फ्रंट जो अंदर से हो रहा है, उसमें सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट जो चीज़ है वो एजुकेशन है, एजुकेशन सिस्टम है। I have been a beneficiary of the Western education system. आप कह सकते हैं कि ये जो भी बाहर पढ़ के आता है वो लेफ्ट लिबरल थिंकिंग से आता है, एक वेस्टर्न पर्सपेक्टिव लेके आता है, लेकिन I will really like to give credit to the Western education system जिसने मुझे ये सिखाया, जो मेरा कंक्लूजन था कि अमेरिका का जो रोल है क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म में, अंदर जो सबवर्शन हो रहा है इंडिया में पिछले 40 साल से, जब से हम इकोनॉमिक लिबरलाइजेशन हम लोगों ने किया, ये सारी जो मेरी थिंकिंग है, जो मेरे कंक्लूजन्स है, ये वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन का ही प्रोडक्ट है। तो ये एक्नॉलेज करना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि वो स्कॉलरशिप में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, वो लोगों में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, वो टैलेंट में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं। ये अभी तक मुझे नहीं लग रहा है कि हम लोगों को एज अ सिविलाइजेशन समझ आया है। शायद 1200 साल की जो गुलामी है उसका ये एक आउटकम है, एक इफेक्ट है कि हम लोग टैलेंट में इन्वेस्ट नहीं कर रहे, और उसकी वजह से आप जेएनयू के टुकड़े टुकड़े जो गैंग है, आपको ये सोचना चाहिए कि उनमें किसने इन्वेस्ट किया है, कौन लोग उनको प्रमोट कर रहे हैं। जो क्रिप्टो करेंसी से जो आजकल आप एजिटेशन देख रहे हैं, या जो आपने आतंकवाद कश्मीर में देखा, जिन्होंने किताबें लिखी कश्मीरी आज़ादी पर, जिन्होंने किताबें लिखी इस्लामिक जिहाद पर, जो आज भी पीएफआई का जो सारा मूवमेंट चल रहा है पूरे हिंदुस्तान में, उसको उन लोगों को कौन फंड कर रहा है, उन पे कौन इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है? कोई ना कोई तो इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है, हम तो नहीं कर रहे। भारत के जो पेट्रियाटिक लोग हैं, नेशनलिस्टिक लोग हैं, नेशनलिस्टिक सरकार है, वो तो नहीं कर रही है, तो कौन कर रहा है? तो इसीलिए मेरा ये मानना है कि उनका सिस्टम, उन्होंने हमसे बेशक सीखा, कल से हम सुन रहे हैं कि कैसे संक्रांत ने एक किताब का मेंशन किया, इम्पेरिशेबल सीड, कि कैसे वेस्ट ने हम लोगों की नॉलेज सिस्टम को चुरा के उसको अपनाया और उसको इम्प्रोवाइज किया और उसको कहीं आगे लेके चले गए। आज की डेट में क्या हम उस सिचुएशन में हैं, उस पोजीशन पे है कि हमारी जो ओरिजिनल थिंकिंग नॉलेज सिस्टम है उसको वापस लाएं, उसको वापस से कल्टिवेट करें, वापस से इन्वेस्ट करें? कहीं ना कहीं मुझे लग रहा है कि जो छोटे लेवल पे चीजें हो रही है, जयपुर डायलॉग्स भी एक इंस्टीट्यूशन बन रहा है, लेकिन इंस्टीट्यूशन बिल्डिंग में जो इन्वेस्टमेंट होनी चाहिए और इंडिया सेंट्रिक, इंडिक सेंट्रिक इन्वेस्टमेंट जो होनी चाहिए इंटरनल वॉर के खिलाफ, वो इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं हो रही है, वो कल्टीवेशन नहीं हो रही है। तो थर्ड फ्रंट जो चल रहा है, हाफ फ्रंट जो चल रहा है, उसको डिफीट करने का एक ही उपाय है कि आप टैलेंट में इन्वेस्टमेंट कीजिए।
थैंक यू। आपकी जो कश्मीरी बहन है श्री शैला रशीद, जो टुकड़े टुकड़े गैंग की मेंबर हैं, उससे मेरे को अगला प्रश्न पूछना है, एंड दिस विल बी द लास्ट सेट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस आई आस्क यू बिफोर वी मूव ऑन. Starting with you, Yusuf, I want every one of you to take 30 seconds, and exactly 30 seconds, not Anand Ranganathan style 3 minutes masquerading as 30 seconds, to give me your solutions to the sustained media onslaught we see against India, which keeps weakening our will to resist. I think when you, sir, and you spoke about that inferiority complex, a lot of that inferiority complex comes about because we seek a certain Western validation for our own actions. We get completely rattled when we get ranked low on human rights and things like that. How do we counter that?
I think first of all, information has to come from the highest level, which is the government of India. Sometimes we see the responses are delayed. There are hours together which are passed before the government responds. And we saw this during the Balakot airstrike and the following day on the 27th, when the Pakistanis went on a media blitz, did all kinds of things, you killed a crow and hit a tree and stuff like that, and our government failed to respond effectively and immediately. So we have to, first of all, from the government at the highest level, it has to come down immediately. Otherwise, you're going to lose the media war immediately. That's one. Secondly, the Brits have a brigade for media warfare and understanding media narratives and to effectively counter it. So you're talking about 3,000 or 4,000 people employed just for social media, looking at information and countering that information. And you can even develop, sources or even people who can then do your work. So
भाई,
this is also
सरकार में
happening.
क्षमता है, मेरे को तो क्षमता नहीं दिखती. आपको कहाँ से
भाई,
दिख
हम
रहा
तो
है?
क्षमता डेवलप करनी है ना. These
थोड़ा
are the
थोड़ा
things which are
realistic
happening.
solution दीजिए.
These are the things which are happening. And look at us. We're the largest people, consumers of social media. We are millions of us. The government, in fact, can use so many of us who are there on social media, the social media influencers. Are we doing that? Is there any effective way of tapping all this talent, these influencers which are there to put forward the government narrative? Or what the government has to say, the message does not go out, and the other side is much more effective in channelizing. And look at this, even the Chinese, after the Galwan incident, we lost our people. The Chinese hid the losses that they had. It took the Russians, a leak from the Russians to say that about 45 Chinese were killed. What was information coming from our side? Nothing. It was silence. And when there is silence, it will be exploited by the enemy. So this is
Excellent.
where the media.
So I'll take
has
this
come
point
out.
to Sushant. Sushant, he made a point. In Galwan, there was official silence. There was a lot of social media types going around assessing what damage had happened. Even during Balakot, this happened. What are your solutions within 30 seconds? What needs to be done realistically?
Look, I think depending on the government to come up with communications, I think that's a mug's game. The Indian government is incapable of doing it. The kind of hierarchy, अब संजय जी मुझसे फिर खफा हो जाएंगे, जो मैं IAS अफसरों के ऊपर अक्सर I take pot shots at
अरे वो
IAS
खुद
officers.
IAS अब हम प्राइवेट में वो IAS ऑफिसर मेरे साथ
वो
बहुत
यार
गाली देते हैं।
once an IAS officer always an IAS officer, तो अब वो problem बड़ी होती है. But ये जो bureaucrats की, so you know there is a hierarchy. Now, for example, look at the speed at which social media moves. Now, today, maybe about 15 years back, 20 years back, what used to happen was, and this is a friend of mine in the intelligence service. तो एक बारी मैंने उससे पूछा यार क्या हो रहा है? मैंने उससे पूछा क्या हो रहा है? तो he says यार मुझे नहीं पता, अभी मैंने टीवी खोल के नहीं देखा, right? Now, the fastest information comes on Twitter, for example. Okay. And it's coming within when Imran Khan was attacked, within 5 minutes, the Twitter space was full of what was happening and all kinds of stuff was coming in. Now, look at the Indian PIB system. पहले वो जी एक रिपोर्ट जाएगी जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी को, जनाब ये हो गया है, फिर वो बोलेगा अच्छा वो अंडर सेक्रेटरी को बुलाओ कि इसका क्या करना है, फिर अंडर सेक्रेटरी फाइल मूव करेगा. अब 10 दिन हो गए हैं तो अभी ट्विटर हैज ऑलरेडी गॉन अहेड. Either you change the system of how this thing is going to happen. Now, we should always learn from the enemy. Again, in the case of the enemy, it's backfired and boomeranged really badly, and I'm talking about Pakistan. The Pakistan ISPR has what you might now call the 12th corps of the Pakistan army, which is the troll corps of the Pakistan army, right? They train people to handle the social media. In fact, they publish pictures कि हमने इनकी training की है. Now these guys are let loose. Some of them are given stipends, some of them are not given stipends, but many people will do it simply because they feel it's a national duty, right? A lot of the BJP narrative, for example, they are useless. The BJP, have you ever seen the BJP Twitter handles and other things? Utterly crap, right? They have no idea of communication. But you look at the way the people who support the party carry forward the narrative. They're doing it on their own, right? The same thing, train a bunch of people on what are the imperatives, what are the things, so that when an event like this happens, you don't need to depend on a Yusuf who will do some satellite analysis and come up with, or a Bene Dose who will come up with something and say, no, this is how air warfare takes place, this is what might have happened, or some retired Air Force officers now they are doing it on their own. Nobody has instructed them anything. So what you need to do is build a system and an ecosystem which then takes forward. Now, where this backfires is the way it has backfired on the Pakistan army. That the troll corps which they trained was partly a troll corps which they shared with Imran Khan. Today, that same troll corps is saying Bajwa is a traitor, Pakistan army Murdabad, and carrying out that whole narrative against them. So be careful.
BJP IT cell cannot be India's IT cell.
No, certainly not.
Yeah. Okay, that is the lesson. Shiv, 30 seconds to you.
When I was 20, I used to see a 40-year-old person say something slightly stupid. I thought it was some great wisdom. When I became 50, the same guy was, when I became 30, same guy was 50. And I thought maybe this is a good thing. And then when you yourself reach 50 and you see the guy who's 70 talking the same rubbish, then you know that these guys are not going to change. Change has to come from below. Use social media. This is a great tool. Get the young people to understand what is wrong. Let the old buggers die. Excuse my language.
Right.
This is it. Only when those guys go is this going to change. No training, this, that. And if you give me 30 seconds more, about education. There is a book, there was a book written by one of our former chiefs of air staff when he visited Kurt Tank. Kurt Tank designed the HF-24 aircraft, the Marut. And Kurt Tank had a drawing board in every room. And this man asked him, why do you have a drawing board in every room? He said, I do the drawings. Your engineers don't do the drawings. And this is still true. Our engineers learn nothing. They don't do it. They don't learn with their hands. And who are the people who do things with their hands? It's the Musalmans in the automobile workshops. We need to employ these people who know how to work with their hands, give them engineering training, and not these guys who...
But sir, you tell me what engineer in India that passes out actually wants to do the engineering part. They all decide their managers after doing...
no, that is one thing.
उनको एक screw लगाने को बोलो, they're like, हाय, मेरी बेइज्जती कर दी, मेरा शादी नहीं होगा, मेरा दहेज नहीं मिलेगा.
No, the other thing is my son, he will now become a software... My son will become a software engineer and go to America. That is, he'll be a coding coolie over there.
No, they're destroying America. They've gone there and become woke. So, you
Yeah,
know, we're
so-
exporting
so
our
that- yeah,
rubbish.
that-
That's a very good thing.
that
It's a
is our-
secret weapon towards destroying
that is
America.
Arti's domain. That is Arti Kuku's domain about them destroying.
That
But
is
this-
our
to be-
0.5 front against the
No,
Americans.
Exactly.
yeah, we trained 4 lakh engineers and only 1 lakh are employable. Our education does need to change. Sorry, I digress from the topic.
Aarti, 30 seconds to you quickly on what you think should be done.
Well, first of all, I really feel that India is not ready for 2.5 front war. तो छोड़िए, जो हमारा internal battle हो रहा है, उसके लिए भी तैयार नहीं है. But भारत की जनता तैयार है. वो डंडों से, वो पत्थर उठा के, वो भूख से मरे, लेकिन वो तैयार है. भारत सरकार तैयार है कि नहीं, उस पर मैं नहीं टिप्पणी करूंगी, लेकिन भारत की जनता तैयार है. मेंटली तैयार है, स्पिरिचुअली तैयार है. और जो एक डिटर्मिनेशन और विल की जो जरूरत थी, जो दबाई गई थी पिछले 70-75 साल में, जो दबाई गई थी, वो उसके खिलाफ जो मोर्चा यहाँ खड़ा हुआ है और बाहर है, वो एक ही आवाज में, उनके लिए मुझे नहीं लगता ये 2.5 फ्रंट वॉर मायने रखता है. उनके लिए सारी दुनिया एक तरफ और भारत एक तरफ, और वो भारत के लिए खड़े होंगे.
आपको IC-814 याद है? IC-814 हाईजैकिंग याद है?
बिल्कुल.
वही भारतीय जनता जाके वाजपेयी के ऑफिस 5 दिन के बाद ही प्रोटेस्ट कर रहा था कि
बहुत
हमारे
अच्छा।
बच्चों को ले आओ, और उसी वजह से उन सबको छोड़ा गया जिन्होंने मुंबई पे हमला किया.
IC-814 का भारत और आज के भारत में बहुत अंतर है. मैं बिल्कुल नहीं मानूंगी कि जो उस वक्त हालात थे, वाजपेयी की सरकार, अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो नेहरूवियन सरकार ही थी, वो लेफ्ट लिबरल सरकार ही थी. लेट्स एक्सेप्ट इट. इन द एंड वाजपेयी जी भी, उनकी भी जो मंशा थी कि भारत और पाकिस्तान में अमन की आशा हो. अमन की आशा को जो भुगतान है वो मैंने भरा है, वो कश्मीरी हिंदू समुदाय ने भरा है. और आज की डेट में ठीक है, आपको जितना भी क्रिटिसिज्म करना हो मोदी सरकार का, लेकिन ये बात तो तय है कि 2019 5 अगस्त को उन्होंने एक ऐतिहासिक डिसीजन लिया, कश्मीर को पूरे भारत के साथ जोड़ा हमेशा के लिए, फॉर परपेचुइटी. एंड सेकेंड कि पिछले 3 साल में इंडिया पाकिस्तान के बीच में कोई टॉक्स नहीं हो रही है, ऑफिशियली नहीं हो रही है, और इसलिए ये वो भारत नहीं रहा जो वाजपेयी जी का था. तीसरी बात मैं कहना चाहूंगी कि सुशांत जी ने, शिव ने बहुत तारीफ तो नहीं, मैं कहूंगी मॉडरेट वे में ही तारीफ की अमेरिका की, लेकिन जो नैरेटिव वॉर चल रहा है, जो लेफ्ट लिबरल कबाल की आप बात कर रहे हैं, वो किन के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स है, किन की बात करते हैं? वो उसी यूरोप की, वो उसी अमेरिका की बात कर रहे हैं, वो उन्हीं अंग्रेजों की बात करें जिनके हम गुलाम थे. तो ये मत भूलिएगा, तो ये मत कहिए मुझे कि अमेरिका का मार्केट, यूरोप का मार्केट. आज की डेट में भी ट्विटर ने आपको ब्लॉक किया है. अभिजीत, अय्यर, मित्रा को क्यों ब्लॉक किया, पूछना चाहिए आपको. मुझे ब्लॉक किया था. ट्विटर क्या मेरी कंपनी है? मेरे दादा की कंपनी है, अमेरिका की कंपनी है. फेसबुक पे, ट्विटर पे, यूट्यूब पे, गूगल पे हम द न्यू इंडियन की लड़ाई रोज की है. तो मुझे ये कोई कहे कि ये हाफ फ्रंट वॉर जो है सिर्फ अपना इस्लामिक जहाद, पाकिस्तान का और चाइना का वॉर है, नहीं, इसमें सारी दुनिया मिली हुई है.
अच्छा, अब हम ऑडियंस प्रश्न पे जाते हैं. श्री आजाद वर्मा जी जो जयपुर के हैं वो पूछते हैं, Yusuf, I'm directing this at you. With drones, etc., now coming in with artificial intelligence, has Indian investment in systems like MBT tanks become misplaced? In this 2.5 front war, which are the new areas we need to focus on?
No, the legacy systems are there to stay and for a purpose. So India is also already looking for a light tank, for example. You would see that, although in the Russian war in Ukraine, although the Russians have suffered great tank losses, the Ukrainians want more tanks, and they're asking. Recently, they've got certain T-72 tanks supplied by the West. So there are legacy systems which will remain in place. This is a cat and mouse game. New weapons are developed to take out certain weapon systems. There is a countermeasure for that. Drones are the new system. It's something that India is lacking. I think one of the biggest effective system in the last few years has been this Turkish TB2 drone. It's a very cheap drone, but very effective. Costs about $1 million. 7-8 crore का एक drone है, but it wreaks havoc. Use it like a reusable cruise missile. अगर से गिर भी जाता है, मार गिराते हैं उसके तो कोई गम नहीं है. Compared to say $100 million Reaper from the US, India has to develop these cheap drones. We're coming up with certain swarm drones, but those are not for this purpose. Something like a TB2 can wreak havoc, and especially on a two-front war, if we are able to make a lot of such drones, it'll be an effective deterrent.
हमारे अजय भाई को पिस्तौल का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट नहीं देंगे, तुमको लगता है ड्रोन का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इंडियन कंपनी को देंगे?
हाँ, तो ये तो प्रॉब्लम है ही ना. But the thing is, people have to come. Now the thing is, there are certain companies who are coming up with prototypes and showing it to the government. And there are I know of a person who has gone through this. He's got a Navy contract with 10-12 crore ka, which is a start. And I've in fact told Aditya bhai कि आप ये route पे जरा जाएं, focus करें. Let's see if we can get something out of it. So there are certain companies. I mean, even big companies like Bharati has invested so much money. Bharat Forge, Kalyani has invested so much money. They have a lot of prototypes, a lot of machinery ready. They have to keep at it. It's sad that they don't get the encouragement, but it is available. I'm sure sooner or later, especially with what's happening with Russia now, they are not going to be able to supply us with weapons. I mean, उनकी लगी पड़ी है अभी तो.
But I think the sad thing, of course, is that Atmanirbhar Bharat is going the Make in India way. You don't see the Make in India lion anymore, do you? शायद थोड़े दिन में Atmanirbhar Bharat भी आपको सुनने को नहीं मिलेगा. To Shiv Shastri ji, sir, how can the IAF evade Chinese air defenses in Tibet? They can't fly low in mountainous. Can they fly low in mountainous regions? Flying 50 feet was easy during the World War II in the propeller age, not in the supersonic era.
Yeah, okay, first of all, error. It was flying low in the World War II is all rubbish. They've done it in 1965, 1971. They still practice at 50 feet. And it's easier to fly actually in Tibet. Tibet is already up there at 4,500 feet. You fly at 4,550 feet. And what happens is you're using the mountains. No radar can go through mountains. Excuse me. What did Abhinandan do? Now, if you're the type who doesn't believe that Abhinandan shot down something, I have nothing to say to you. But what Abhinandan, it so happened that Abhinandan, used the mountains as a radar shadow, surprised the F-16 and shot it down. So we have these huge mountains, and which the Chinese can't see beyond. And you have to go low. Going low is the only option. Going low is the only option. They will fly at 50 feet. I mean, why can't a plane fly at 4,550 feet or 4,600 feet? So it's a mistake to think that at high altitude, you can't fly at low altitude. Yes, that's true. At 4,500 feet, 4,500 meters, you can't fly at 10 meters, you hit the ground. But you can fly a little higher than that. Just the question is flying above the ground so that any radar or any aircraft that is trying to see you is fooled by ground clutter. The thing is the radar has to see you. You have to evade that radar. Either you have stealth or you use, and it's not just that, the air chief will say, chalo, tum jao udhar, low level mein jao. It's never done like, it's tactics. What happens is you send a feint attack. You send somebody in some place which looks like they're going to attack something. You send somebody else which looks like they're going to attack something. Then send somebody at low level. And all three may hit their targets or two may be feints. So these are all war tactics. So don't believe this sort of stuff about this thing. The Air Force is capable. My main problem is that the Indians are being informed by YouTube and social media about rubbish. Especially most of these things come from America, and most of these things come, we see Chinese things. I would advise, and I'm sorry, it's easy for me to say, I've done this for the last 35, 40 years, There are so many histories, Indian Air Force and military histories. Read them, see what they've done. Unless you do that, don't talk, don't get from YouTube and tell me I saw this on YouTube or Facebook. Sorry, no disrespect. Disrespect meant.
So I've actually personally seen a MiG-27 do a 50-foot run. And trust me, you don't know it's there till it's above your head. And by the time you know it's above your head, it's already gone somewhere. So, you know, there are lots of tactics that you can use to do that. The last
10 seconds to that. What you said? Yeah. There is a good video on YouTube about how long it takes to aim a Stinger. Okay? You're going to need 15 seconds. At 50 feet, you're not going to have 15 seconds to aim.
You won't. So the last two questions are for me, apparently. Is there any similarity the foreign policy of Krishna Menon and S. Jaishankar? No. Krishna Menon was fantastic at making enemies with people pointlessly. अगर आरती मेरे को बोल रही है अभिजीत तुम इतने अच्छे लड़के हो, तुम ये हो, बहुत सुंदर हो, I'll be like, तू एकदम अगली लगती है, तेरे बाल घटिया हैं, तेरा सारा घटिया है. He was that kind of a man. S. Jaishankar is not like that. He makes glib remarks, sure. There hasn't been any policy changes or augmentation, but he is nowhere near Krishna Menon. He's way, way better than Krishna Menon. I don't think anybody should be compared to Krishna Menon. Please, this forum pe gali mat dijiye aise. Second question. Praveen Sani, a military book writer, claims that we severely lack electromagnetic wave cyber capabilities. Even this government appears to be not focusing on that. Your opinion on that? Yes, that is unfortunately true. The program, I also used to be at our ORF at one point of time, and I can tell you there was a marked difference between our military cyber experts. So we run this program called Sci-Fi. The government and military experts from India who used to talk on cyber issues and the briefings we've had on electromagnetic, which is to say jamming and electronic warfare issues, they're simply not up to the kind of scratch that you hear from a lot of other countries. And the problem is these capabilities are the most closely guarded. They will never be shared with you, not the theory behind it, not the knowledge behind it. You will be actively excluded from any knowledge sharing on this. So with that, we end this session. I hope I did a fairly good job as a moderator. If not, Sanjay ji is sitting there. Please feel free to throw anything at him for making me moderator. Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed the Jaipur dialogues. I'm sorry if we didn't enthuse you enough, but we tried our best. Thank you.
So civilization, if you look at the history of the church, and the West really derives its history from the church, all of the Abrahamic religions are geared for the narrative war because that is all they have.